Sunday dinners at my parents' house had always followed the same rhythm: roast chicken, soft jazz humming from the Bluetooth speaker, my dad reading headlines off his phone, while my mom asked about my job like she didn't already stalk my LinkedIn. That evening felt no different at first. I'd brought a bottle of red from a vineyard near Asheville, something smooth to take the edge off their passive commentary about my nomadic lifestyle as a freelance UI designer. We sat down, clinked glasses, passed the potatoes. My dad mumbled something about the news being a circus. My mom asked if I was still dating that girl who never wore real shoes. I answered with a tight smile, focused on carving the chicken. Then came the silence. Not just the quiet that hangs after someone says something dumb, but that thick, electric stillness that tells you something is about to break. My mom put down her fork. "You're not really my child." Just like that. Not whispered. Not emotional. Flat. Measured. A fact. I looked up, fork halfway to my mouth, thinking I'd misheard. "What?" I asked. She didn't blink. I said, "You're not really our child, Evan." My dad shifted in his seat, eyes suddenly locked on the placemat, like it might offer an escape. "What are you talking about?" I said again, this time sharper, but my voice still felt like it was coming from somewhere far away. "We were going to tell you," she said, folding her napkin carefully, like this was just another cleanup routine. "Eventually." I looked to my dad. Nothing. No denial, no correction. Just that hollow, guilty expression I hadn't seen on him since the day we put our dog down, and he didn't speak for 6 hours. "Tell me what?" I said, even though I already knew. The food on my plate suddenly looked foreign. My hands felt numb. I stood up, the chair scraping hard against the floor. "Evan," my dad said, but I was already walking toward the door. My chest felt tight, like the air in the room had turned to cement. My mom's voice followed me out, but I didn't hear the words. I didn't want to. The night air hit me like a slap, sharp and bracing. I walked down the porch steps without grabbing my coat, barely noticing the cold. My car sat parked in the driveway, dew already collecting on the windshield. I didn't drive. I just stood there for a while, staring at the steering wheel like it might give me directions on how to process what had just happened. Behind me, the door creaked open. My dad stepped onto the porch, his silhouette haloed by the warm glow of the dining room. "Evan?" he said. I didn't turn around. "What the hell was that?" I asked. He exhaled slowly. "It's complicated." That was all he offered. No apology, no clarification, just those two useless words that meant everything and nothing at once. I finally turned to face him. "So it's true?" He nodded once. "We should have told you sooner. But you didn't." I climbed into my car, shut the door before he could say anything else. The engine stayed off. I sat there, knuckles white around the steering wheel, breath fogging up the glass. Inside, I could see them clearing the table like nothing had happened, like the floor hadn't just dropped out from under my life. I drove home on autopilot, couldn't remember the stoplights, barely remembered pulling into my apartment garage. Everything blurred. Everything buzzed. When I got inside, I collapsed onto the couch, still wearing my coat. The walls felt too quiet, too still. I pulled a blanket over myself like it could protect me from whatever this was. My mind wouldn't stop. "You're not really my child." Her voice echoed again and again, relentless. Not angry, not emotional. Just factual, clinical, the kind of sentence you might read in a textbook under the heading, "Irregular Family Structures." I checked my phone. Nothing. No missed calls. No follow-up texts. Just the quiet weight of a secret that had been sitting under my skin for 29 years without me knowing. I didn't sleep. I just lay there, wide-eyed in the dark, wondering how you could grow up in a house and never notice the foundation was made of lies. I was back at their house by 8 a.m. the next morning, still in yesterday's clothes, running on zero sleep and too much adrenaline. My mother opened the door like she'd been expecting me. No surprise on her face. Just tired eyes and a faint crease between her brows, like she was already bracing for impact. I didn't sit down. "Tell me the truth," I said. "All of it." My dad appeared in the hallway, holding a coffee mug like it was some kind of shield. "Evan," my mother started, voice calm. Too calm. "Maybe we should take a breath first." "No." I stepped into the foyer, shutting the door behind me. "You dropped a bomb on me last night and then acted like we were out of napkins. So now you're going to talk." She looked at my father. He gave the smallest shake of his head. She ignored it. "You were adopted," she said, words coming slow, as if choosing them from a limited inventory. "But not through an agency. Then how?" I asked, pulse in my ears. She didn't answer, just lowered herself into a dining chair like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. "You were brought to us," she said, staring at the table. "Late at night. You were maybe 2 weeks old, wrapped in a hospital blanket. No name, no papers, just you." I stood frozen. "Who brought me?" Her silence said everything. My dad stepped in, voice low but stern. "That's enough." "No, it's not," I snapped. "You think you can drop something like this and expect me to just go back to my apartment and forget it?" "We did what we had to do," he said, jaw tight. "We gave you a home. You gave me a lie," I said, my voice cracking. My mom looked up then, eyes glassy. But she still said nothing. I waited for more, some thread to follow, but they'd already shut down, locked behind guilt and something deeper. Fear. Maybe. I turned and left without another word. This time, the air didn't feel cold. It felt sharp, like glass, and I was walking through it barefoot. That night, I went looking for proof, answers, anything that would tell me who I really was. I tore through old photo albums, boxes of trophies, yearbooks with forced smiles and bad haircuts. All of it felt like a museum exhibit built around someone else. Then I remembered the box, a small brass-cornered chest that used to sit on the top shelf of my closet. Off limits. My mom once told me it held boring adult paperwork. I hadn't seen it in years, but I found it buried under old blankets in the attic. It was heavier than I remembered. Locked. Of course it was. I carried it to the garage, found a rusted set of tools in a drawer, and picked at the lock until it clicked open with a reluctant sigh. Inside, a folded baby blanket, a hospital bracelet with no name, just male infant, 8, 11, 95, and a single yellowed envelope. No stamp, no return address. Just my birthday scribbled in faded ink. I opened it with shaking hands. The letter was handwritten, in a rushed but careful script. "He is not safe. I don't know who to trust. I had no choice. Please protect the boy. Do not let them find him." No signature, no name. Just that. My chest tightened. This wasn't adoption. It was something else. Something darker. I reread it twice. Then a third time. The way it said, "them," like there were people looking for me. Like I was a secret being hidden. I looked around the garage like someone might suddenly emerge from the shadows. The silence buzzed. I packed the box back up, this time with gloves, suddenly aware of fingerprints, of evidence. I took pictures of everything. Then I sat on the concrete floor, the envelope in my lap, trying to make sense of what I was holding. Whoever left me with my parents hadn't just been desperate. They'd been scared. And now, I wasn't just trying to find out who I was. I was trying to figure out what exactly I was being protected from. Aunt Grace lived 2 counties over in a creaky house that smelled like cedar and old books. We hadn't spoken in years. Growing up, she was the holiday outlier, always at Thanksgiving, never at Christmas. She'd send cards with no return address and call once a year on my birthday. My mom used to call her difficult. My dad just avoided saying her name at all. Still, something told me she might have pieces of this puzzle my parents refused to give. When she opened the door, she squinted like I was a ghost. "Well, that's a face I haven't seen in a while," she said, stepping aside. I walked in, the floors creaking under my boots like they were whispering warnings. The house looked the same as it did when I was a kid, cluttered, cozy, untouched by time. "Tea?" she asked. I shook my head. "I need to ask you something. And I need the truth, not the family version." Her mouth twitched. "So, you've seen through the performance." I didn't answer. Just reached into my jacket and pulled out the envelope. The letter. The hospital bracelet. Her face drained of color. She sat down heavily in the armchair near the window. "They didn't tell you." "They told me I was adopted," I said. "But not how. Or why." She sighed, long and brittle. "You were brought to them. One night. Late August. Your mother, I mean, the one who raised yous, called me the next day, panicked. Said someone had left a baby on their doorstep. Not in a basket, not in a movie way. Just hand it over. There was a woman. She didn't give her name." "What did she look like?" I asked. Grace stood, walked into the hallway, and returned with an old envelope. She pulled out a photo, faded, creased. A young woman in a long coat, cradling a baby. "That's you," she said. I stared at the image. Something about the woman's eyes, sharp, sad, alert, stirred. Something I couldn't explain. "You kept this?" I asked. "Your mother wanted to burn it." I couldn't. I slipped the photo into my pocket, pulse pounding. "Do you know who she was?" Grace shook her head. "But I always thought whoever gave you up wasn't running from something. She was running to protect you from it." I scanned the photo on my laptop at 2 a.m. The house dark, except for the glow of the screen. The image was grainy, but usable. I uploaded it to a facial recognition tool I'd used for freelance gigs photography clients, wanting lost relatives tracked down. Wedding guests identified. The occasional background check. This wasn't professional, though. This was personal. The system took its time. A low hum filled the room as it crunched decades of public records, social media, archival photos. I sipped cold coffee, stared at the woman in the photo, maybe mother. Her face burned into my brain like a brand. The results pinged 5 minutes later. One match stood out. Elizabeth Moreau. Born 1966. Died 1994. Presumed. I clicked the profile. The article loaded slow, like the universe was hesitating. Tragic fire claims wealthy Moreau estate. No survivors found in blaze. House destroyed. Elizabeth Moreau, 28, presumed dead along with husband David Moreau and their infant child. My blood went cold. Infant child. That fire was 30 years ago. I was born 29 years ago. The math didn't make sense unless the timeline was wrong. Or the fire didn't kill everyone. I found a wedding photo. Elizabeth looked older, more composed, but unmistakably the same woman from the picture Aunt Grace gave me. Same sharp jaw, same haunted eyes. And I couldn't shake the feeling that she was looking right at me. Not through me. At me. I dug deeper. The Moreaus had been wealthy, high profile. David ran some kind of biotech firm with government contracts. Elizabeth did public health advocacy. They weren't the kind of people who vanished quietly. But after the fire, everything stopped. No funeral photos, no burial listings, just smoke and ash and silence. I looked back at the baby in the photo. Chubby cheeks, big ears, that stupid cowlick I still fight every morning. It was me. I knew it now, not just a guess. A fact. Someone had faked a death, or survived a murder attempt, or both. And somehow, I was at the center of it. The woman in the photo hadn't abandoned her baby. She'd hidden him, hidden me, which meant someone, maybe more than one, had wanted me gone. And they might still be out there. The hospital was tucked between a strip mall and an urgent care clinic, a squat brick building that hadn't changed much since the 90s. I'd driven past it 1,000 times growing up, never realizing it might hold the key to who I really was. The front desk clerk looked bored, until I mentioned I was researching a family medical history. "Birth records are archived," she said, gesturing to a phone number on the wall. You'll need to make a formal request. I didn't have time for formal. I smiled, pulled out my old student ID, and said I was doing a local history piece on neonatal trends. She raised an eyebrow but handed me a visitor badge. Try the basement archives. Good luck. The records room smelled like cardboard and dust. I found the 1,995 logs after an hour of digging yellowed binders with handwritten entries from a time before digital databases took over. I flipped to August. My birth date. August 11. There were 5 births listed that day. 4 with names. And one that stopped me cold. Baby boy. Unknown mother. Time of birth. 3:28 a.m. Weight. 6 pounds. 9 ounce. Notes. Admitted with external caregiver. No maternal information provided. My chest tightened. There it was me. The hospital had documented a baby, but not a mother. No last name. No father. Just a timestamp and a ghost. At the bottom of the page, in careful cursive, attending physician, Dr. Franklin Roach. The name hit like a bell ringing underwater. I jotted it down and took a photo with my phone. Somewhere upstairs, a machine beeped. The hospital kept moving. But I stood frozen, holding a record of my own arrival like it was a birth certificate from a parallel life. One where my entrance into the world came with shadows instead of flowers. I left through the side exit, adrenaline making my steps shaky. Dr. Franklin Roach. He would have been mid-40s then. That made him what, pushing 80 now? If he was still alive, he might be the only person left who knew what really happened the night I was born. And if he wasn't, then the truth might have died with him. Roach was alive. Barely. I found him through a nursing directory, tucked away in a retirement home 2 towns over. The facility was clean, sterile. The kind of place where time moved slow and everything smelled like antiseptic and boiled vegetables. I gave the front desk a fake name, said I was his grandson visiting from out of state. They didn't question it. Room 214. I found him in a reclining chair, thin, pale, oxygen tubes curling under his nose. His eyes flickered open when I knocked lightly on the door. "Dr. Roach?" I asked. He squinted at me, confused at first. Then something shifted behind his eyes. Recognition or maybe memory. You're the boy," he said. My breath caught. I think so. I stepped inside, closed the door. I found a hospital record. August 11. 1,995. Baby boy, unknown mother. You were the attending physician. He looked away, jaw trembling slightly. That was a long time ago. Not long enough, I said, keeping my tone calm. Please. I need to know. For a long time, he said nothing. Just stared out the window like he might find the words floating in the clouds. Then he spoke soft, raspy. Your mother. She came to me alone. Late. Bleeding. Terrified. Said she couldn't go to a regular hospital. Too many eyes. Elizabeth Moreau, I said. He nodded. She begged me to help. Said powerful people were looking for her. Said if they found her or the child, it would be over. I delivered you in a side room. Didn't put your name on the official registry. I logged the basics and erased the rest. Why? I asked. Because she said it was the only way to keep you alive. And I believed her. His hands were trembling now. She was gone by morning. Left you swaddled in a blanket on the cot. I never saw her again. You didn't report it? He shook his head. You don't understand. Your father David Moreau was mixed up in something. She didn't say what, but she was running from it. Maybe from him, maybe from others. I didn't ask. The air in the room thickened. You were never meant to end up where you did, he whispered. That was never the plan. I sat there, trying to understand what he meant, but deep down, I knew. I hadn't been abandoned. I'd been hidden. I spent the next week buried in public records, newspaper archives, and library databases, piecing together the story of the Moriosmi story, apparently. They weren't just rich. They were the kind of family you didn't speak about in casual conversation unless you wanted to sound impressed or intimidated. Old money, private jets, philanthropy funds with vague descriptions. David Moreau had been the face of the family CEO of a biotech firm called Moreau Advanced Solutions, or MAS, which secured multiple government contracts throughout the late 80s and early 90s. Defense, surveillance, data infrastructure buzzwords that translated to deep government ties and a lot of non-disclosure agreements. Elizabeth, on the other hand, was harder to trace. Public appearances, charity events, but not many interviews. She'd worked quietly with a nonprofit that dealt with medical corruption overseas. Ironically, she was the one pushing transparency. In every picture I found of her, she looked like she was always watching aware, guarded. The fire happened on September 4, 1994. The official story: faulty wiring, electrical overload, too much old wood, and too little fire prevention. The house was enormous on estate in the hills outside Boston. No survivors, they said. David and Elizabeth's names were printed in every headline, followed by, "and their infant son." That detail punched me every time. Infant son, presumed dead. There were no funeral photos. No grave sites I could find. Just one black and white photo of the charred estate behind police tape, and a single offhand quote from a fire investigator. "We're not ruling out foul play." But that line disappeared from follow-up articles. Nothing stuck. Until I found a court document in the corner of a digital Archivian anonymous lawsuit, filed against MAS the same week of the fire. It was sealed. No plaintiff name. No details. But the case number existed. The fire was 3 days later. Coincidence? I doubted it. Something had scared Elizabeth enough to vanish with a newborn, leave him with strangers, and disappear. And if the world believed the entire Moreau line had ended that night, then maybe that's exactly what she wanted. But I was still here, breathing, digging. And someone, somewhere, might not like that very much. The deeper I went, the more obvious it became. The fire that supposedly killed my parents was never just an accident. I found a clipping from an old regional paper buried in microfiche at a local university library. Fire at Moreau Estate. Under investigation for arson. It read in bold print. The article claimed traces of accelerant were found in multiple rooms. Fire had started in the basement and spread with unusual speed. A fire marshal named Connolly was quoted saying, "This wasn't negligence. Someone wanted that house gone." But the story never made national news. Within days, the official narrative shifted. Shorted wiring. No foul play. Connolly's name vanished from the investigation. His report never filed publicly. Just gone. I kept digging. David Moreau's company, MAS, had been under quiet federal review for months before the fire. Rumors hinted at bribery, unauthorized foreign sales, even connections to paramilitary groups operating in Eastern Europe. Nothing confirmed. All conjecture. But enough smoke to make me believe the fire wasn't just a cover-up, it was a cleanup. One article mentioned a former MAS whistleblower named Alan Redmond, who went missing in '93 after filing an ethics complaint. No body, no charges. Just another footnote. And suddenly, my entire existence felt like evidence someone had failed to destroy. My mother Elizabeth had escaped that night. Somehow. With me. And in doing so, she'd erased herself. Let the world think she burned with her husband and infant son because it was safer than being found. But then something had gone wrong. Somewhere between the escape and whatever plan she'd set in motion, she'd made a last-minute choice. Hand me over. Disappear again. Leave me buried inside someone else's life. Maybe she'd hoped to come back. Maybe she never could. I sat in my car outside the library, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding like it was trying to decode the silence. Every record I uncovered felt like a whisper from the past. Every gap in the story felt intentional. People don't just vanish. Fires don't just happen. And families like the Moreaus don't die quietly unless someone makes damn sure they do. I waited until Sunday afternoon, when my parents always took their post-church nap. The house was still, familiar, but not comforting anymore. I moved through it like a stranger, careful not to leave any sign I'd been there. My mom's hairbrush was in the bathroom drawer, tucked under old lipsticks and a half-used bottle of lavender lotion. My dad's was on the nightstand, still holding a few coarse silver strands. I slipped both into separate plastic bags, labeled them like evidence. Then I drove straight to the FedEx office and sent them along with a swab of my own to a private genetics lab in Oregon. Expedited. No names, just barcodes. I didn't tell anyone what I'd done, not Grace. Not the guys at work. And definitely not my parents. For 5 days I didn't sleep right. I kept checking the tracking number, like it could make the results arrive faster. Kept picturing the lab techs opening my samples, the little tubes and brushes, the sterile tools peeling back everything I thought I knew. The email came on a Wednesday morning. A PDF attachment. I clicked it open with shaking hands. The words were clinical, detached, designed to be objective. But their meaning punched like a fist. Probability of biological relationship between Subject A, Evan Carter, and Subject B, Linda Carter. 0%. Same for my dad. 0. Nothing. Not even a distant cousin. I wasn't their snot by blood, not by accident. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop still open, staring at the screen like it might glitch and show something else. Anything else. But the truth was right there in digital ink. I'd been living someone else's life. Their name, their home, their lies. And they'd look me in the eyes every day and let me believe it was real. I printed the results, folded them into my jacket pocket. I didn't call. I didn't text. I drove. My mother opened the door before I knocked, like she'd been standing there, waiting. Her face was pale, like she already knew why I was there. "You have to stop this," she said, voice low. I stepped past her into the foyer. My dad sat in the living room, eyes heavy, jaw clenched. I tossed the envelope onto the coffee table. The paper slid out just enough for the bolded zeros to peek through. "You lied," I said. "For 29 years. My mother sat slowly, hands trembling in her lap. "We didn't know what else to do." "Try the truth," I snapped. That would have been a start. Silence stretched. Then finally, she spoke. She came in the middle of the night, bleeding, shaking. She looked like she'd been through hell. Said men were coming for her and the baby. That if they found either of you, they'd kill you both. She swallowed. "She handed you to us. Begged us to keep you safe. And then she left." I stared at her. "You didn't go to the police?" "She told us not to. Said we couldn't trust anyone. Not the government. Not the hospitals. No one." "And you believed her?" "I did," she said quietly. Something in her eyes. She wasn't crazy, she was hunted. My dad spoke for the first time. "We tried to find her afterward, but it was like she vanished." "You should have told me," I said. My voice was flat, but my hands were shaking. "We wanted to, but every year that passed, it got harder. We kept waiting for her to come back, for some sign, but nothing ever came." My mom's voice cracked. "And after a while, it just became easier to pretend you were really ours." I looked at the people who had raised me, who had watched me scrape my knees, graduate, get my first job. And all I could think was, "I don't know you." I turned to leave. "Evan, please." "You kept a secret," I said, hand on the doorknob. "Now I'm going to find out why." The email came at 2:43 a.m. No subject line, no sender name, just one sentence in the body. "She's alive. She never stopped looking for you." Below it, a GPS pin, rural Vermont. Remote, forested, nothing else. I stared at it for 20 minutes, trying to decide if I was losing my mind or if this was the moment everything turned. I replied with a single word. "Who?" No answer. The pin stayed static on the screen like a dare. I packed a duffel bag by 3 a.m., didn't leave a note. I drove through dawn and into early afternoon. the roads narrowing from highways to state routes to cracked back roads bordered by pine and silence. The town didn't have a name on any map, just a mile marker and a gas station with a broken sign. But the bookstore was real. A little weathered building with ivy crawling up the side and a hand-painted sign that read, Fox, Finch Books. Inside, it smelled like old paper and coffee. The air felt warm and still, like time had stopped moving a long time ago. I almost missed her at first. She was at the counter, sorting a pile of hardcovers with a practiced calm. Her hair was streaked with gray now, but the face was unmistakable. The same one from the photograph Aunt Grace gave me, from the fire investigation archives, from my nightmares and my blood. Elizabeth Moreau. She looked up. Her hands froze. Her eyes locked on mine, widening slowly like recognition had to move through 2 decades of grief before surfacing. Evan, she whispered. My heart stopped. I hadn't told her my name. I hadn't said a word. She stepped out from behind the counter, like each step might dissolve if she moved too quickly. You're real, I said, the words barely more than breath. She reached up, brushing my cheek with trembling fingers. So are you. Her voice broke on the last syllable. She pulled me into a hug. I didn't resist. I couldn't. We stood there, 2 broken halves held together by 29 years of silence, and the space in between where a mother and her son should have never been separated. She made us tea, sat me down at a small table by the front window while rain tapped gently against the glass. The shop was quiet, closed early, with a hand-lettered sign. They told me you were dead, I said finally. Everyone did. She nodded slowly. That was the point. She reached for a photo tucked behind the register me as a baby, swaddled in a blanket I hadn't seen since I was a child. I've kept this with me every day. I watched her hands as they held the picture. They were steady now, despite the tears brimming in her eyes. You left me, I said, not accusing. Just needing the answer to land in words, not just guesses. She swallowed hard. I didn't want to. That night, the fire wasn't an accident. David, your father, had gotten involved with people he shouldn't have. He thought he could outmaneuver them, but they wanted something he wouldn't give. He told me they'd come for him. For all of us. Her eyes met mine. So I ran. But you survived. Barely, she whispered. I was supposed to die in that house. So were you. They wanted the entire Moreau name wiped out. David stayed behind. Said he'd stall them. I took you and fled. But they followed. We were being watched everywhere. I couldn't keep you safe and keep running. So I made the hardest choice of my life. Her voice cracked, hands curling around the teacup. I left you with people I trusted. Good people. People who wouldn't ask questions. Then I disappeared. Why didn't you come back? I asked. I tried, she said. But after a year, everything went dark. The trail to you was gone. And if I pushed too hard, I'd expose you. I had to let go to protect you. I stared down at the table. The rain outside had picked up, streaking the windows like tears. I spent my whole life thinking I didn't belong, I said. Turns out I was right. You belonged, she said softly. Just in the one place they'd never look. Her fingers reached across the table. I let them. You were never abandoned, Evan. You were saved. It took time. Time to forgive. Time to understand. Time to stitch together a life that had been pulled apart by fire, fear, and silence. I didn't expect it all to make sense. I just wanted it to stop feeling like a lie. My adoptive parents, Linda and Richard, were hesitant at first. My mother cried when I told her I'd found Elizabeth. My father didn't say much, just nodded and walked out of the room. But a week later, I got a call. His voice was quiet. Is she kind? He asked. I told him yes. That was all he needed. I spent that fall driving between Vermont and my hometown, trying to keep the balance. Sundays with Linda and Richard, midweek visits to Fox, to Finch Books. I helped Elizabeth digitize her catalog. She taught me how to brew real tea. Eventually, we stopped speaking like strangers. The truth didn't fix everything, but it gave context. And with that came something close to peace. I began writing not because I wanted to relive the trauma, but because I wanted to reclaim it. For the baby left in the hospital, for the mother who vanished to save him, for the family that raised me with love, even if it was built on secrets. I called the memoir Smoke and Silence, a story about identity, legacy, and what it means to belong when your past has no anchor. The book was published 2 years later. Small press, modest buzz, but it found an audience: people who had lost their roots or had them ripped out. People who needed to know they weren't the only ones piecing together the truth. At the launch event, the bookstore was packed. Elizabeth's store, our place. Chairs crammed between shelves, a folding table at the front stacked with copies. I wore a black shirt and tried not to sweat. I signed names, shook hands, smiled for photos. And then I saw them, both of them. Linda stood near the travel section, nervously twisting her wedding ring. Elizabeth was by the biographies, arms crossed, trying to look unreadable. They spotted each other. Didn't smile. Didn't cry. Just nodded. One slow, mutual acknowledgement. By the end of the night, they were side by side in a photo between them. Awkward, but real. Proof that sometimes the truth doesn't destroy a life. It rebuilds it. Brick by brick. Page by page. This story was intense. But this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.